Joining me now is Democratic Congresswoman from California, Barbara Lee, and Phyllis Bennis, a fellow at the Institute for Policy Studies and author of Before and After, U.S. Foreign Policy and the War on Terror. Congresswoman Lee, what is your reaction to Rand Paul's challenge to your party?
Well, first I have to say Senator Paul must have not read history, because this is total revisionist history that he's putting out. Of course, he was not in the Senate when these authorizations took place. Actually, Lawrence, I was the only one, Democrat or Republican, to vote against President Bush's authorization to use force, which was a blank check, in 2001. When the Iraq resolution came forward, I offered an alternative that said, hold up, let's wait until the United Nations conducts its inspections to determine whether or not there are weapons of mass destruction there. I only got 72 votes. Again, Democrats voted with President Bush in a bipartisan way to authorize Iraq. I, over the years, have offered amendments to withhold the funding. It was called the Lee Amendment. Myself, Congresswoman Waters, Congresswoman Woolsey said, look, the only funding we should appropriate would be to protect our troops and bring them home. Well, guess what? The majority of the House voted with, in fact, President Bush. And so Senator Paul needs to not politicize what is taking place and move forward, and as I am, and many Democrats, encouraging the president to come to Congress with an authorization. Actually, it's time we repeal the 2001 and 2002 authorizations so that we can have a full debate on the costs and consequences of this new war, which we are now in, because we have committed our troops and our resources to this new front on the war, which is a new war, not the old war.
Phyllis Bennis, it does seem that the 90-day clock under the War Powers Act has expired, and there is no legal basis now for the war against the Islamic State as of today.
I think that's absolutely right, Lawrence, and I think the problem is that, like international law, laws on questions of presidential power are only relevant if somebody raises it. So Congresswoman Lee has raised it importantly, and others as well, but until it becomes a major issue, until someone actually tries to hold President Obama accountable, I'm afraid that the legal technicality is not going to be sufficient. What will be sufficient, this issue should be in front of the Congress, and the Congress should vote no to say that we do not want to go back to war. It didn't work the last time. This notion that 3,000 troops, we can call them combat troops or not, I want to know what President Obama thinks they're going to do. They are shot at if they have to use their weapons by their own understandings of being, if they believe they are in danger, they will. That puts them at risk of being in combat. I think it's really a sort of a sham to say that they're not combat troops. But whatever those troops are, we have 3,100 U.S. troops on the ground that we know of right now in Iraq. And the notion that somehow 3,000 troops is going to be able to create and train a viable military when 160,000 U.S. troops at any given moment, rotating over 1 million troops over almost a decade in Iraq, was unable to create a viable military, this simply isn't going to work. There is no way of building a proxy army. The CIA has already said we can't do it. It was extraordinary last week in the report that was leaked from the CIA to the New York Times when they said there was only one successful example, and that was Afghanistan, which of course led to 9/11.
Yeah. Congresswoman Lee, the truth about your colleagues, it seems to me, is that in both parties, they simply don't like war votes. They don't like the pressure. They don't like going on record. They don't like having to live with the aftermath of a war vote one way or the other. And they mostly seem very happy to not being forced by their leadership in the House or the Senate, by Harry Reid or by John Boehner, to vote on any form of supporting the war against the Islamic State.
No, Lawrence, I believe when you look at what has taken place over the summer in August, we have communicated to the president and to our leadership, many of us, Democrats, mind you, and some Republicans, that we want a debate and a full authorization, an up or down vote. Many Democrats I know have called for that in our meetings, in our caucuses. Our leader Pelosi has called for that. So I think that even though it may be, or it is a tough vote, we've cast many tough votes in the past. But I believe, and that's why I'm concerned about Senator Paul trying to politicize this, because I know Democrats want to have this debate and talk about the costs and the consequences and then call for a vote. And that's the way our Constitution works. That's what it requires. And we need to do our job. And I'm convinced that the majority of Democrats want to do their job.
Let's listen to President Obama actually calling on Congress to do its job and vote for this.
I'm going to begin engaging Congress over a new authorization to use military force against ISIL. The world needs to know we are united behind this effort, and the men and women of our military deserve our clear and unified support.
Phyllis Bennis, there's the president asking for it.
We are not united behind this effort. That's the bottom line. There is no military solution. President Obama has told us that over and over again, and he was right when he said it. He now seems to have abandoned that original position that he took for really a very long time. And I think that what we're looking at here is a scenario all too reminiscent of what happened right after September 11, when we were given one choice. We either go to war or we let them get away with it. It was a lie then, and it's not true now. We need to look at the alternatives to war. We need diplomacy. We need to increase humanitarian assistance. We need